really disappointing not being able to do things like normal people like you used to be able to do.
I have always loved football. I think I was an above average football player. I wasn't great. I wasn't going to go on to play in college or anything, but I was good enough for the Wilton High School team. But that's what happens when you get Lyme. You have to stop doing the things you love.
Most people, they just think of Lyme, oh, you get it from the tick, you go to the doctor, you take antibiotics, and you get better. But it's for people that don't get diagnosed or don't take enough antibiotics that it can have a serious impact.
People think of it as such an insignificant disease.
And it's just so easy to get it.
I think people really need to appreciate that.
It's very hard to live with Lyme.
If you're watching this video right now, it's because Lyme disease is a problem where you live or where you go to school. Now, if that's true, it's important that you know that these ticks, I'm talking ticks so tiny you can barely see them, they're out there, in your backyards and in your soccer fields, and believe me when I tell you that they are armed and ready to infect you in exchange for a sip of your blood. Okay, here we go. Lyme disease 101. Lyme disease is a bacterial infection transmitted by the bite of an infected tick. Now, usually within a few days to a few weeks, you'll start to experience some sort of symptoms. This could be a fever and chills, it could be headaches, or all of a sudden you're tired all of the time. But if you develop a large, red, bullseye rash, that's an unmistakable sign that should serve as a clear and loud alarm. You need to seek medical attention. Translation, go to your doctor, because if you catch it early and you treat it properly, you're a lot more likely to fully recover. Okay, so that may sound simple. The problem is not everybody develops this red bullseye rash, or the symptoms that they do develop end up getting dismissed as some other illness. As a result, there's a lot of people out there with what's called late-stage or chronic Lyme disease. Now, just on the off chance you haven't met anybody suffering from this disease, I have. And it can be a serious and debilitating thing to go through.
It was almost unbearable for me. There was a time when I couldn't walk, and it happened around when I was 11. I woke up one morning and I was paralyzed from the waist down, and I tore the covers off, and I tried to swing my legs around my bed, and they just wouldn't go.
So you couldn't feel your legs at all?
I could feel my legs, I just couldn't move them, and that lasted about a month. They diagnosed me with a number of different things before they decided that it was Lyme disease, because it shows up in so many different forms. I mean, my doctor said it was not standard, but it sometimes did happen. That was probably the most terrifying part of my experience. I also, with that same bout, lost a lot of my memory. I definitely have chronic Lyme, but we learned that this last bout was a reinfection. Although I have never shown any of the normal symptoms like a bullseye or the swelling, any of that stuff. I was about to start my third year playing football at Wilton High School when I was diagnosed with Lyme again. It was just something I really didn't want to have to deal with again. As a teenager, being able to say that I'm on the football team with all the rest of the guys, you know, it's just, there's nothing better than that. That's why it was so hard when last year, halfway through the season, I had to stop playing because I had to have a tube put in my chest that goes directly to my heart. So you can't play a contact sport with that kind of medical equipment attached to your body. If you can play a sport and if you get true joy out of it, there's nothing that's going to stop you from playing unless something in your life happens like this and you have no choice.
Lyme disease was so a part of me that it controlled just about everything I did. I mean, I have facial tics, or I kind of twitch every once in a while. Like I'd scrunch my face, or I'd bow my head down, or I'd blink a lot, and just things I did, like I'd have to do it 5 times, and I don't really know what that came from. It was embarrassing a little bit, and it still is. So it was, I guess, a little OCD too, but I couldn't really control it, which was, you know, upsetting.
It just gives you really awful migraines, and it limits a lot of what you can do. I can't physically sleep, and I've tried all sorts of sleep medications. I've done sleep studies at the hospital, and none of it's worked. It affects your brain, obviously, And it makes,
I don't know that.
Oh, it does.
What-
And that kind of makes it difficult to focus and just put words on paper.
So you have difficulty keeping the train of thought.
Definitely.
Wow.
Like, math is my best subject, and when I went to go take a test, it was like 65, and I was like, what's going on? I knew all this. Or I'd be sitting at home on the couch watching TV, and the commercial would come on and be like, what show was I watching? It's just, something was wrong, and you knew it.
One game I had like 2 sacks and 3 forced fumbles. It was an excellent game. My best game probably I think I've ever played. But the next game, I remember our quarterback, we'd get in the huddle, call the play, go to the line, and I would forget the count, go off sides all the time. And even if when I didn't, I'd block the wrong guy. It was just very frustrating because I know I can do better.
I just came from interviewing these kids. I mean, like, what is it that Lyme disease does that they're inflicted in such a way? Like, how?
So it's a big puzzle as to why somebody should be as sick as you saw. When usually when we think of Lyme disease, we think of a tick causing a bite, and then you get a rash, and then you treat it. The rash is gone, and that's it. The problem is, as you saw, that some kids get long-standing chronic problems, and it can be profoundly disabling.
Do you know why exactly it affects the body in that way? Like,
Bacteria inside the tick. It's a spiral-shaped organism called a spirochete. It goes into the bloodstream, and it travels. So it goes up to your brain, it goes into your heart, it goes down into your liver, it goes into your joints, it goes into your tissues. Basically what's happening is the immune system is constantly revved up, and it's producing these chemicals that cause fatigue and muscle pains and joint pains and also cloud the consciousness so that people feel foggy-headed, they feel like they can't concentrate. So if you're in school and you're trying to listen to the teacher, it's like your brain is just, it's working more slowly.
I had to drop out of a bunch of honors courses and a bunch of classes that I was recommended to be in.
So the kind of problems that the children experience, headaches are really huge, neck pain sometimes, phenomenal amounts of fatigue.
So a lot of my friends thought that I just didn't want to go to practice, that I wasn't dedicated. And I started believing that a little bit myself until they did diagnose me with Lyme, and then I knew that there was a reason why I felt like I couldn't do it and why I was dragging on the field.
They can sleep 14 hours and then they wake up and they're still exhausted.
I would be so exhausted, I mean, I wouldn't get out of bed.
So there's no way in the world that they can get to school at like 7:30 or 8 o'clock for their morning classes.
They kind of rearranged my schedule as I got older so that I didn't have any morning classes. There were free periods and put all my classes in the afternoon.
Mood swings are really common. So you can get a lot of irritability, suicidal feelings.
I was depressed. It was very, very difficult for me. It was not a fun time. I went and talked to a bunch of people and they fixed me up, and I was on antidepressants. The antidepressants did help me, and I didn't have to take them for that long. It was more just to get me out of this blue funk where I just didn't want to be with anyone, go to school. Just wanted to stay in my room and just be by myself.
Behavioral problems are common because they're so agitated internally and they don't know how to process it. You can get what looks like a personality change where suddenly the sweet kid is now a hostile, irritable, annoying kid. And if it happens to coincide with teenager years, then the parents would think, well, is this my kid just being a teenager or is my kid ill?
I would get very aggressive and very unnecessarily angry if I was ever playing video games with my brother. Like, for instance, if my guy died, I would actually flip out. And there would be times when I would warn my brother. We'd be playing and I said, Patrick, you better go upstairs because I am going to flip out in just a couple seconds. And he would go upstairs because he knew I wasn't kidding.
I'd be kind of violent. I wouldn't really think before I acted. There was no real filter of right and wrong. I mean, now that I look back on it, I was kind of uncontrollably obnoxious. I still have a little of that, but...
Another big problem of this illness with kids is that they have fluctuating symptoms, so that one day they're feeling horrible and there's no way they can go to school. And then if they feel good on a particular day, then they want to go see their friends or do something. But if they're out there doing something with their friends and a teacher happens to see them, the teacher will think, oh, she's really a crock.
My teachers, would say, "You look really healthy, what's wrong with you?" Because I wouldn't come into class that much sometimes, especially when I was feeling sick. They don't really see me when I'm at home and I can't get out of bed and I don't have makeup on and stuff like that.
Right.
And one of the worst aspects of this disease for them is that they're not being believed.
It's not something you can see. That's what a lot of people don't understand. And a lot of people think that if you can't see it, it doesn't exist, which is completely false.
So the experience from the child's point of view is, I have this horrible illness, I've got these incredible headaches, I'm profoundly tired, I can't concentrate, and nobody's believing me.
Sometimes I'd not be able to do the hand in the homework because I couldn't focus. Like my math teacher, I'd tell her that it was because of the Lyme disease. I was using it so often, she wouldn't always believe me. I mean, I know some kids using it as an excuse, but the thing was, it was really a problem. And to have it not be, believed was kind of an insult.
Even now, some of my teachers don't believe me, or they just don't want to understand. Now, I guess they want to help, but they just don't know how. And that's another reason why I think that schools should focus a little more, and even with the teachers, on Lyme disease and how to help.
I don't really go to school anymore.
So you're out of school completely now?
I would feel a little better usually over every summer. So I would go in for the first 2 weeks or so, and then I would just completely crash.
What, do you have a tutor at home? And the plan is that?
You just do what you're most capable of, and that's about it, and try to get better.
This one girl hasn't been to school in literally a year. She's out of school now. She's being home tutored. And I mean, what?
Why is it that the antibiotics aren't killing the darn organism?
It's just difficult to find one treatment that works. So you go from one antibiotic to another.
I can't give you a answer that's 100% for certain, but I can say that the possibilities are that the spirochetes are somewhere in the body where it's hard for the antibiotics to get to, such as in the brain or deep in the tissues. That's one reason why the antibiotics may not kill all the spirochetes. So even though it's killed, let's say 50% or 70% of the spirochetes, there's still 30% there. So you remove the antibiotics, those 30% start to multiply and cause illness again.
So what is that like when you go off the medicine to see if you're better and you realize no?
It's like you're hopeful that you'll be better, and then you're not, and you're like, oh man, I have to go back on them. And
Recently I tried to go off and my grades started slipping.
Is that the spiral-shaped bacteria actually goes inside cells. It's like spirals its way right in. And the antibiotics, many of the antibiotics don't go intracellularly. So then you have to give antibiotics that work inside a cell.
Another thing that seemed to be like a running theme was just misdiagnosis. People were told they had chronic fatigue syndrome, ADD, or OCD. I don't understand it.
It looks like so many other diseases. It is easy to diagnose if you have the rash. Everybody recognizes the rash. They don't even bother with the blood test. They say, "Oh, that's Lyme disease. Treat it. You'll do well." But the reason why it's hard to diagnose is that even if you do think about Lyme disease and you test for it, the blood tests, unfortunately, are not perfect. In fact, they have huge problems. The public assumes that blood tests are definitive and that laboratories are the same, and they're not. The testing, even though it's helpful and important, is not definitive.
You went for 10 years without actually knowing exactly what it was, right? And as opposed to correctly diagnosing it as Lyme, they thought you had some other mental health issues or...
Exactly. I've been, being treated for every other thing in the book.
So you go from being treated for ADD, having to take antidepressants, having to go through all these sort of difficult things, not knowing what it is, and then you find out that it's Lyme, start taking antibiotics, and it gets...
And I just started getting better, and we're like, wow, it's working.
How do you feel about yourself after having an answer and being diagnosed, then as to how you felt about yourself before?
I had all these mental problems where I was not being able to control myself, and now, I can control myself pretty much perfectly. I mean, as my age should.
What's really unbelievable is the fact that these are not rare cases. There are thousands of new cases of Lyme disease every year. In fact, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, Lyme disease is one of the fastest growing infectious diseases in the United States. So, who are all these people getting Lyme disease? I'll tell you who. We are. More kids and teenagers get Lyme disease than any other age group. Why? Because we're the ones who spend the most time outside. Another really good reason for you to listen up. Now, obviously, we can't spend the rest of our lives indoors, so what do? The deal is this. The more you know about this disease, the better you'll be able to protect yourself. To start off with, you really need to know how these ticks transmit Lyme disease. And just so you know, it's pretty interesting, but it's pretty gross. Listen to this.
It will perhaps crawl up onto a shoe looking for direct contact with the skin, and it can crawl up under your trouser and begin moving up your leg, looking for a suitable site to attach itself. It then grasps your skin with its tarsal claws, uprights itself, and begins cutting the skin with very sharp cutting blades.
Keep in mind that shot you were looking at was magnified about a zillion times. This is what you're really up against. Digging into your skin with claws, slicing and cutting with cutting blades, you think, well, at least I'd feel that, right? Wrong. The crazy problem is this. The tick literally stops you from feeling anything. Here's how it works. At the same time the tick is slicing up your skin, it secretes a cement-like substance so that it won't fall off of you. Then the tick injects you with an anesthetic, its own form of Novocaine or Advil, if you will, and that stops you from feeling any pain. Then this little tick spits an anticoagulant into your bloodstream to make sure that you keep bleeding, and an anti-inflammatory so you don't itch and you don't develop a welt. You'll probably have no idea you've been bitten. As it starts to insert its mouth parts into your body, it literally cuts the small blood vessels in your skin while the blood leaks into this pool that it's made. Now, it takes about 2 days for this pool to fill up. In the meantime, the tick's just sort of hanging out. It's in the last 12 hours that the tick takes what's called the big sip, where it takes most of the blood that it's going to get from you. Now, ticks can drink up to 50 times their own body weight. They literally fill up like a water balloon, only it's not water that they're being filled up with. So the good news is, if you find that tick and remove it properly, you greatly reduce your risk of being infected. Okay, so you can't feel these things, and remember they're really small. So the only way you can find them is if you look for them. So you have to look for them. Okay, so let's say you find a tick on your neck, on your arm, wherever. You can't just freak out and yank it off, because if you do, you can do a lot more harm than good. You have to remove it properly. Now that means you use a pair of tweezers as opposed to your fingers. If you use your fingers, you could accidentally rupture the tick's gut, and it would spill the spirochetes into your bloodstream. Take a look at this. They'll show us how to do it properly.
It's going to come in from the side, not the top. Grasp it as close to the skin as you can, firmly and gently. Just pull the tick out. And the skin has a little more stretch than human skin does.
You know, you really want to be sure to wash your hands and clean the wound with some antiseptic when you're done. And as for the tick, these ticks can be examined to see if they're infected. And this information could be very important in deciding treatment options. All right, so we know why it's important to check for ticks, and now we know how to remove a tick once it's on us. But why not avoid ever getting to this point? There are a bunch of things you can do to help keep ticks from ever getting onto you. Here's what the experts recommend. They say you should take your pants and tuck them into your socks, like this. This is actually a really good idea, but some people might say it's not the best fashion statement. I don't know why. So if you're not going to do this, at least consider wearing bug spray containing DEET, or wearing long sleeves and long pants when you go into the woods. Another really good idea is to wear light clothing so you can spot ticks more easily. While you're at it, it might not hurt to wear a hat.
To me, Lyme disease is a huge deal. A lot of people don't take it as seriously as I think they should.
It's a lot easier to prevent Lyme disease than it is to treat it.
Lyme disease, it's like a huge hole that's been taken out of their life.
There's a lot of missed opportunities, and even when I watch my brother doing everything he's doing, I will sit and watch him play sports and just think to myself, I wish I could do that again. I wish I had another chance.
You're kind of on your own and definitely lonely.
This is hard. This is tough stuff. Lyme disease can be a really serious illness, and it's important for us to realize that there are a lot of people out there suffering from it. So your best bet is prevention. So how are you going to do that? First of all, you need to check for ticks. And secondly, you need to know the symptoms. If you develop a large, red, bullseye rash, unusual joint pain, muscle pain, headaches, neurological problems, you need to see a doctor and get tested for Lyme.
The good news is that many of these children end up doing very well over the long term. It's not to say that they aren't still struggling in one way or another, but they're a gazillion times better. And it's a happy and important note to end on, which is that these children can get a lot better, and people with Lyme disease can get a lot better. It just takes time.
So there's a story. I think it's one worth listening to. And hopefully you got something out of it. Thanks.